Good evening and welcome to the August 2nd broadcast of VB LiberTEA podcast. Our show is broadcast every Wednesday from 7 to 8 p.m. and can be viewed on your Facebook page. The host of VB LiberTEA is former Virginia Beach Councilman John Moss. My name is Laura Hughes, former Virginia Beach School Board member, sitting in for the vacationing John Moss on his anniversary vacation with his lovely bride. He will be return next week. Tonight our guest is Paula Chang. Paula is a nurse. Mm-hmm. She's also a Navy wife who has lived all over the place. That's right. And a mother of two Virginia Beach school graduates. And thank you for joining us tonight. You want to share a little bit more about your bio?
Sure. I'll just make one correction. Our children did not attend Virginia Beach Public Schools.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
They grew up in Virginia Beach, though.
They grew up in Virginia Beach. They didn't, which is going to give more fuel to the fire to the school board for me to even have the audacity to be up there speaking, but that's okay. What would I say? I'm a nurse. My background is critical care and trauma, and in addition, I have a degree in healthcare and public administration, and that's pretty much my background. We've moved around a lot. I've enjoyed it. We've seen a lot of different parts of the world. I'm a native New Englander, born and raised in Boston. That's pretty much it. That's my background.
So seeing a lot of different areas of the world, dealing with trauma and public policy, this really put you in a good position to deal with our local government and specifically school board issues, because we have a lot of people that are feeling trauma right now. We have a lot of policies that we need to work on. And this is not Virginia Beach specific. Virginia Beach is just our bubble, and that's what we can deal with. Yeah. So how did you initially get involved?
Well, actually, the reason I became involved, I had no intention of becoming involved. Hadn't gone to a school board meeting in my life, hadn't really paid attention, I think, as most of us would have to say, to what was going on in the schools. But I had heard about this thing called critical race theory a couple of years, well, 2.5 years ago, I think. And I heard that they were going to be people were going to be speaking about it at the school board. And it just caught my attention because I've been married now for 38 years, actually 39 years, to someone who has not a single drop of white blood in him. And I thought, all the things I'm hearing that they're saying about critical race theory don't fit with what my experience has been, nor my husband's. And he also would be very aware of it because he's the son of two immigrants who came here to the United States with nothing, not even the ability to speak the language when they were in their teens, and achieved enormous success, as did other members of his family. So I thought, no, the thing that I'm hearing about critical race theory and that all whites are prejudiced against other minorities and things like that, that's not my experience in life, nor is it my experience with our family. So I marched myself to the school board thinking that everyone on the school board was just didn't quite understand, or maybe needed to hear it from a different perspective. And that was when they, unfortunately for me, lined you up in the hallway because you couldn't go into the school board room except to speak because we were all going to be in such bad shape because of COVID. And I will say my nursing experience actually did suit me well for speaking about masks at the school board because I know a little bit about having used them forever. But so while I was standing in the hallway, you had to, your important 6 feet social distancing, you had murals, if you know, on the hallway when you go out, that each year, it looks like what I interpreted it as was the mural that they put up for the new coming year, and then they moved all the other murals over. And you could see, as you moved down the hallway from the furthest distance in time that the school board was to the one closest to the school board door was the most current, you could see the pictures that they had on their murals for each year shifted what the priorities were in education. And from that, I realized these people aren't misguided. This is specifically done with intent to alter the minds of what's going on with the children and to actually, you could see right there, to take away the rights of parents, to decrease the importance of parents and families in the lives of the children. So I went in and I remember saying I had to alter my speech because of what I just saw in the hallway. And then I did, I finished it up and I went home because I had said to Dan, well, I'm going to go do this. He didn't even go. I think you stayed home and watched golf or something, I don't know, on TV. And when I went home, I said, you're not going to believe what actually is really going on. And so he said, I'm going to go and look at it. And so he went the next week. And what for us was going to be a one and done turned into being, and as unusual as this might be to say, I think I was put in that hall at that time because I was supposed to get the message that I'm supposed to fight this. And that's how we became involved. And we went from having our happy little free early retiree life to our life actually revolves around the school board schedule. But that's what we're supposed to do, and that's what we're going to do.
So I want to kind of touch on 3 points that you brought up.
Mm-hmm.
One is you talked about your husband and your husband's parents being immigrants and children of immigrants. Now, I am third generation American on one side of my family, and your husband is first generation American, actually, I believe on both sides of his family.
Yep.
And it has been my experience that people who came to this country around that time came with the intent to be American. In fact, a lot of them did not even teach their children the language of the country where they came from. Some words, but not completely fluent, because they came here to be American.
Yeah.
And I think that those people are probably the best suited to discuss coming to America. You can achieve your dreams, you work hard, that type of thing. What is your take on that?
Well, I think that a lot of the things that we do sometimes in this country right now don't strengthen individuals as to, I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. When my father-in-law came here, he was 14 years old. He didn't speak a word of English. He was put in a 4th grade grammar school because he couldn't speak any English. Yet 9 years later, he graduated from William & Mary with a degree in physics. Still not perfect in the in English. And actually, to tell you the truth, to the day he died, sometimes he'd say things and you're, what was that quite? But he came here and he worked really hard, and he saw this as the land of opportunity. And because of that excessive amount of work that he did, he rose to become the first naturalized Asian to become an admiral in the United States Navy. And our daughter once, for a college paper, interviewed him and to ask him, you know, how, when you came here, because we're steeped in all this racism, and I don't deny that there is racism in any way, but the idea that you can't achieve because of it, Tara asked him, how did you deal with that? And he just, being his personality, got a little irritated and said, you just keep working. And that it's exactly what kind of question is that? You just keep working and you will achieve. And so I'm not saying that all people don't run into obstacles, but I'm saying there is absolutely achievable dreams in the United States, and it's a perfect place. And I also think that most immigrants who come here have the same desire that my in-laws had when they came here. Exactly the same desire.
So interestingly enough, we have the whole first world problem mentality of America's keeping this person and that person back. That seems to be completely contradictory to the fact that millions of people are flocking to our shores, legally and illegally, because they just want to get here. It is astounding that all those people from various ethnicities would show up begging to be here if they thought that they were going to be discriminated against. So it's unfortunate our children are being taught that
differently, that they understand, those people who come to this country, they understand what it is that we have here more than our own children sometimes that were raised here, because we have been so gifted and given so many beautiful, wonderful opportunities, and frankly, such an easy life by comparison, that small little minor things we get to blow up and pretend are great big things.
The people who come here for freedom haven't had the luxury of being limousine liberals who sit on the sidelines with these platitudes, letting people know how bad they have it.
Exactly.
Another thing you brought up was having to stand in the hall with your mask 6 feet apart. It's my opinion, and I was on the board at the time, and I had a problem with this, that this was something that the board tried to milk for as long as they could in an effort to keep the public out, to keep the public from speaking. What has been your experience, and what have been your observations?
You want me to speak about how very gracious the board has been to the public? Yes, absolutely. Well,
did they not come out and make you and your husband sit 3 seats apart
they
one night
actually came
after
out
you rode to
one, yeah, and
your car
I think
together?
we probably moved over for 2 minutes and then left. But you see so many things that went on there. You'd see, you would see them in their room, the side room, eating and talking with everybody and doing everything. Well, they had people out in the public that were outside in the that weren't even allowed in the room or made to stand outside. We've stood outside in the rain because we were just too dangerous to bring inside. We stood outside in the blistering heat. We weren't allowed to use the bathrooms. And I remember at one time, and this is what I thought was one of my earlier experiences, and I thought this was really odd. I was out there waiting, I'd been there waiting for a long time, and I went up to one of the women who check you in, and asked me, I going to go to the bathroom, and it was like she enjoyed telling me no. And so that just, of course, you can imagine this doesn't make sense. This is our building. We should at least be able to go and use the bathroom.
Well, who knows what kind of anarchy would have prevailed had we allowed citizens to use the bathroom.
Well, they've been locked out. So one of the school board members came up, and I said to the school board member, can you please ask if I can go and use the bathroom? And the school board member, I would have anticipated, would say, I'm bringing her in to use the bathroom. Instead, ask this person, may I please bring her in to use the bathroom? And I thought, something is off when people within the administration are lending permission to members of the school board for very simple, basic things. Mm-hmm. And that needed to be addressed. There was so much that we saw. We saw everything that we would try to do that was, and this was, I think, was some of the most difficult stuff. The things that we were asking for were not off the wall. They were like someone brought in, Robert Dean tried to bring in the American flag, or you wanted to say something that was slightly different than what the agenda was. Or you wanted to say something that was a disagreement, and we get it even today, as you saw at the last school board meeting, a disagreement with what it was that the members of the school board were trying to push through. And they would throw people out. They would gavel them down. Then there was the time, of course, Mrs. Riggs took the sign and actually walked in front of the school board, took a sign that belonged to a citizen and threw it on the ground. And no problem with that. Then there was another time I was screamed at by another member of the school board, which I think you may recall that. You're just like, this is so out of kilter. And what they were objecting to were the citizens coming up and saying, I don't want my child exposed to this. I don't want my children wearing masks in school. No, I will not have my child vaccinated in order to get them educated in the Virginia Beach Public Schools, because that is my child. You had all these parents coming out, and citizens like ourselves. Of course, our children weren't in the Virginia Beach Public Schools. But coming up and saying this is wrong for our society, and the draconian bullying that they would use against parents was unbelievable. You have to stand in the, at one point, they tried so hard, they made everybody, okay, now we're going to speak. Everybody who's going to speak has to go stand in the hall. So they knew it was going to take like 2 hours to get through the speakers. So they wanted you to stand in the hall. They wanted you to be uncomfortable. There was one time, a couple of the security people were overheard, okay, we've had it really hot in the room, now let's get it really cold. You know, they were adjusting thermostats. There were so many things that they would do to try and make it impossible for you to come there, hoping that you would leave. They would, another welcoming thing they did was go to the press and claim we were threatening. And
oh, yes.
Yeah, actually, someone on some thread on social media who lived in California made some sort of thing that could be interpreted as a threat. Now, it was investigated. They knew before they went to the press, the school board members went to the press, they knew ahead of time that this had been disproven as any threat, but they used it to gin up public opinion against the people who came to the school board and stood up against them. And then, of course, there's the famous actions when we had such successful rallies, and they therefore made rallies illegal. And I could go on and on, but I think we get the picture.
There is no shortage of stories to tell, sadly. One of the things that you pointed out that is a lot of the thrust of the problem, in my opinion, is that the board majority at that time, and it's questionable now sometimes where the majority is, but that's a different topic, puts itself out there as this strong, united front against the citizens. But, as you pointed out, you had board members asking permission of staff members to take a citizen to the bathroom, which is ridiculous to start with, but in no other context is a person going to ask someone who, their employees, what they can do. I think people have forgotten that all school employees work for the superintendent, and the superintendent is merely an employee of the board. At no point should board members be asking the superintendent, their employee, or his employees for permission to let a grown-up use the bathroom in a building that the public owns.
Or just come in for any reason. I'm bringing, open the door, I'm coming in is how it should be. Well, you get to a point of what I think hopefully will be shifting if they correctly choose the new superintendent, but it's still, the board majority is still flipped the wrong way, I believe. But we had all that time that, now I would call it, and they didn't like it, the, what was that, the Handmaidens.
Oh, yes.
Where it wasn't a situation where the board was directing the administration. The administration was absolutely directing the board.
Absolutely.
And coming up with the policies and saying what was going to be done. And as much as the board would like to now say, no, we were directing them, it was so obvious in things like going to the policy. I would go to the policy review committee meetings, and some of the paperwork that was necessary, the agendas and things like that, weren't made up, because the public's supposed to be receiving it at the same time as the board does. So as a member of the public, of course, I'd be sniffing around looking for it. And the material wasn't ready. And the material wasn't ready because it hadn't been yet written, I believe, by the attorney and one of the other administrative staff who would basically, I think, be doing it. And they were totally directed. You could even see, you could watch, you could see Dr. Spence directing Carolyn Raleigh. You could see it. And you can see even with the present board chair, Riggs, her dependence on other people to tell her how to run the board or how to direct things and what to do, and you can see it. What I do think that we have to keep going with is, if you just use, for example, the policy review committee, because you were on that, I would go to those meetings, and they were essentially run by the board attorney, Cammy Lynette. She'd stand at the podium, she'd read what was in there, and then it would get talked about a bit, and then it would be voted on and moved on. That's not what's happening now. What's happening now is the board policy review committee members, or at least two of them, were providing what they wanted as far as direction for the board to be. And when you go to the policy review committee meeting, it actually runs like a policy review committee meeting, what I would imagine should be. You know,
I agree.
Well, it will change now.
Well, sure.
Because of what they just did to shift.
So it's kind of disheartening that you have people who want to make sure that they maintain control of a committee, but they're not maintaining control. What they're doing is giving up control. The same way the board majority gave up control to the superintendent, the policy review committee with a left majority will give up any control of policy, and they'll give it back to staff. Those are problematic. I have viewed it as a way to deny any accountability, because staff members are not chosen by the public. They're appointed. So if you have board members who need you to vote for them in 2 years or 4 years, and the public's unhappy with the policy, it's easy to say, superintendent did that.
That's right.
Our attorney said to do that. But the truth is, they all work for you.
That's right. And it's our job as members of the public, it is our responsibility to stand up and not let that go by anymore. And that's why we've tried to drive home that we are the boss. We are the public. We hired you. You actually work for us, Mrs. Riggs. And the superintendent is supposed to work for you at your direction, at the direction of the school board, at your direction. And that was not in any way how it was working. And it's all going to be a long haul, but we just have to keep at it. They work for us. And if there's any question that the public isn't becoming aware of it, then those people on the board who want to be reelected in 2 years need to start looking at what happened at the last election. And if they keep on with what they've been doing, actually I think to some degree it's probably too late for some of them, then they are going to be gone as well.
Well, it should be too late for some of them.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I would point to specifically was this whole debacle of the Policy
Mm-hmm.
Review Committee. Now, I want to preface this by saying I think the board has too many committees, period.
Yep.
I think that you could use a workshop quarterly and have bylaws presented to the entire board. I don't think you need an audit committee. However often that the auditor presents something, present it in a workshop. I think it's twice a year, maybe 3 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
Do that.
Mm-hmm.
Legislative committee, they have somebody who comes in and presents that, present it to the whole board once a year. The whole board has to vote on it anyway. I'm not sure why we have the governance committee. Should just go away. It's a big waste of time. It's really just a group of mean girls who are trying to micromanage the rest of the board and punish people who disagree with them. That having been said, if you're going to have all of these committees, they do need to be distributed equally. Absolutely.
With equity.
Yes, with equity. They like to say that. Right, in fairness.
Yes.
The least thoughtful and absolute weakest argument I heard for putting someone on a committee is your term is going to end soon. Now, this came up in the context of Beverly Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Beverly Anderson has been on the board for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
If she has not had an opportunity to be on a committee until the last 2 years of her third term, then we need to wonder what people were doing for the other 10 years that she's been on the board. That doesn't even make any sense. That is, like I said, you just put the least thought into that.
Well, I just look and add one thing to that. They'd argue out of both sides of their mouth on that and someone has to have the opportunity. So that would mean Beverly Anderson should have stepped aside.
That's right.
Because she's been there for like ever, and then on the other hand, they say, well, it's when we have to get people on, because how else do you justify Beverly Anderson staying on? By saying, well, her term's going to end. Her term's going to end. Well, so is Vicki Manning's term going to end. But at any rate, I look at the Policy Review Committee as something that they used. I mean, if I understand the history of the Policy Review Committee, it's because the bylaws need to be reviewed every certain number of years, and so they created this committee. But then when they would have these school board meetings and they'd have these committee meetings, and they'd do whatever the heck they were directed to do, whatever they wanted, plus whatever Dr. Spence and Dr. Robertson directed them to be doing. Dr. Robertson was there at most of those meetings, so because I sat there. So then when all of the business came up where you had citizens standing up and saying no, they actually used the Policy Review Committee not for what it was intended for, but to silence the First Amendment rights of the citizens who wanted to speak there. They did everything they could through the Policy Review Committee to cut down your time, to say where you couldn't gather, to try and say what you could or couldn't speak about. So they used that in an improper way. So now we had the board switch, and they were so very generous. Mrs. Riggs was. She mentioned it to Kathleen the other night, Kathleen Brown, to allow Kathleen to be on the board for a little while. But what they found out when they on the Policy Review Committee, they got Kathleen Brown and Vicki Manning and Beverly Anderson. They actually got some real substantive work done.
Well, we can't have that.
No, you can't have it. And the other thing you can't have coming out of the Policy Review Committee meetings is things that might make the other side of a conservative side might make them look bad. And I think the death knell was that book policy. That was a reasonable book policy. It should have passed, but they had to face the fact this came out of the Policy Review Committee that something was reasonable and careful, but they didn't want. So, but they looked bad with that. They looked very bad and became an issue that can be used against them. So what do? We have to control the Policy Review Committee so that no more of these things can come out. Because if it had been a flipped committee the other way, the book policy would have never come out. And it should have come from that.
Well, and it was also very, very clear when they were discussing that there was, in all likelihood, a mini meeting prior to the big meeting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because when an argument is that Beverly Anderson should stay on there because her term's getting ready to end, but someone, and I can't remember, because it went so many times, I can't remember who made which new...
Mrs. Martin, Stacey Martin wants to be on, I know that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I know. I mean, she's one that wanted to be on it, I believe.
well, but there was one of the many suggestions had a configuration that still had Beverly Anderson on it, and Beverly Anderson voted against that.
Yeah.
She voted against that because that group wanted to make sure that they had a left majority.
Exactly.
So it had nothing to do with her staying on there. It had to do with the majority.
And I know that I think that it's a little bit unfair of you to say that because it was done fairly, and we know that it was done fairly and was done without politics because, again, Mrs. Riggs told us she is the least political person on the board. So, she told us, though. That's how we know. Anyway, yeah.
Well, the whole thing was very, very interesting.
Well, it's enlightening as far as how they've had to adapt themselves and how we will have to adapt ourselves.
They always make it up as they go along so they can push through whatever they want. We are clearly here tonight, unscripted, unplugged, and unfiltered.
And for more than 3 minutes.
That's right. Yeah, we get more than 3 minutes, so we get our say here. You brought up some of the COVID protocols, and that is another thing. And I don't know about you, I'm never going to forget what they did to our children. We had children who were maybe looking forward to athletic scholarships. They were not going to be allowed to continue without weekly testing or getting that shot, which we now know is dangerous, and everything you heard about it was a lie. But we had people in there who forced people, to me it's the same as holding people at gunpoint, to crank that poison into children who had no choice.
Right.
It is unconscionable. And if we're going to have people out there on the policy committee, we need to have policies that prohibit administration from making health care decisions
for a family, for children.
Yes.
That's right. Well, it's interesting that you are forced. You have to wear a mask. You don't get a choice in that. You have to be vaxxed. You're not supposed to get a choice in that. But you can choose your own sex.
Well, we're just following the science, apparently.
Yeah, and none of it follows the science. The masks didn't follow the science. The vaccines didn't follow the science. One of the things I knew from my own background is when they rushed those vaccines. That's one of the reasons I didn't take it. That they rushed those out, and I know how that works. I know how long it takes to develop a vaccine. I know how much checking is done. I know how when you get just not very few, side effects from it, that there's halts to things, halts in testing, and they look at it. But not this. You get more testing. What do? You get more problems. What did they do? They covered it up, and they said that it wasn't, it's not, you got to have it or you're going to kill it. But no, that's not true. And part of that is proven in their own comfort level with the fact that wasn't true, is that they closed the schools so children couldn't learn. But their daycare centers were open for the school, for people who worked in the school there. Children went to the daycares. They went to the daycares that were, my understanding, is funded and run by the Virginia Beach City Public Schools.
Absolutely.
And this, if I understand correctly, members of the public who work, not members, but people who work for the city also use that daycare, but I'm not sure. But I do know the public schools do.
Yeah, it was supposed to be open to city employees, including city employees' children, as well as the school staff's children.
And I don't think most of the public knew that was going on. So how is it that your student, when you're not an employee, is too dangerous to be at school, but the children of employees of the city school system, they can be at this daycare system? It puts the lie to the whole thing.
Oh, well, there were just so many lies. We actually had parents sending in emails, because they got right on board too, some of them, that said we should not open the schools and give people a choice as to whether their children would learn virtually or in person, because if somebody else chooses to send their child to school and I keep my child at home, it won't be fair.
But you made a choice. You made a choice. That's your decision.
Yeah, that actually was one. We had a parent write in and state that we couldn't open the schools because then we would have to use the buses. And at that time, the buses were delivering food to people's houses, and it wouldn't be right to use the buses to send children to school. And as a PS, could there be more variety in the food you're delivering? I'm not kidding.
I'm
You
sure
can't even make this stuff up.
If you look at, it's funny because one of the things I think that is definitely this, and you said this, that this isn't just happening here. This is happening everywhere. But this is our patch. This is our area. This is where we have to fight. And you see all this insanity going on, and it's become normalized almost. That chaos is normalized, and it shouldn't be. And then you have all of this discussion about everyone needs mental health counseling. You need you need all of this, and you don't understand why we have the discipline problems in the schools. Why is this person depressed? Why are they? Well, let me just throw this out, that our culture has weakened families, and in weakening families, you've weakened the culture. You've weakened what children learn as they grow. There are no absolutes, or they're told there are no absolutes, but in reality there are absolutes. Mm-hmm. Your family, your parents are given less to a large degree, I think, when you look at like that resolution that was put forward by Kim Melnick in the last session, that they're essentially, I don't know if she used the word, but essentially they were co-parenting. Mm-hmm. Equal partners, that's right. They're not equal partners.
No.
The parents are superior they're not even superior, they are the ultimate end.
That's right.
Of who is to raise children. And when you say you're equal partners, when you are delivering, you can't educate the child, but you can use the school bus to send apparently an adequate menu of food home to, then there is something very wrong when they are attempting to usurp parents' rights in the transgender issues, that parents aren't allowed to know what's going on with the children. They're teaching children to distrust their parents.
That's right.
To distrust their families. And they're saying if you tell your parents that you're transgender, and your parents get upset or are shaken by you saying that you're at risk, when in reality it can be anything that shakes up like, when I say shake up, I don't mean shakes it up and ruins it. All families have to go through things, and all families have to struggle through the difficult things and get to where they're going to go. And most parents are loving and good parents that get a right to have also their feelings about different things while they work together as a family. And you saw it time and time again with the speakers, where I remember in particular one night, one student came up and said that they told their parents and it was really awful, and they'd fight and they'd argue. Sounds like a normal teenage household to me.
Yes.
And they're fighting and they're arguing, and in the end their parents came around and supported them.
That's right.
And so that is what happens in families. That is how it works. No family goes without that. And why is this one issue, the one that the parents are horrible at, and we have to take them away from you, we have to take their right, and we have to teach you how to sneak around about your parents, because it helps break down the families, and it makes the government more important than the family, therefore they have control over you. And I was saying earlier to someone that it's like they have gone and they've made it now that they're criminalizing good parenting.
Absolutely. Weakening the families is the goal. I mean, every fascist, communist, oppressive society, that's the first thing they did was separate the children from their parents.
That's exactly right.
And they need to normalize the chaos.
Yeah.
With the masking, for instance, I'm almost 60 years old. I know it's not normal to walk around day in, day out with a muzzle strapped to your face.
Nope.
A 5-year-old, you can normalize it. You can make it seem normal.
Yep.
Because they don't know enough to know that you're lying to them.
Yep.
That's why they push so hard in these schools for that kind of thing. They pushed it because they want to normalize things that are wrong. Yes, there are absolute right and wrongs.
There are absolute.
Science doesn't change as far as biology for the most part.
Nope.
Gender is not fluid. Your parents are allowed to disagree with your teacher, and if your teacher and your parents disagree, guess what? Teacher's odd man out.
That's
Parents
exactly
have the final word.
That's right.
Period. And I've been hearing these children, and they are children.
That's exactly right.
Very impressionable children who spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 9 months out of the year, being pushed an agenda. Talk about all of these dangers. And so some of my observations have been, we hear about that we need to be safe and equitable at school. I know of 0 schools where they ask what your sexuality is before you apply for an AP class or an academy, or make your school schedule, or apply, or try out for softball or whatever it is. I believe that all of these programs are open to every student, regardless of their color, regardless of their religion, regardless of their sexuality. So we already have that. Bullying, there's already a 0 bullying policy. And there are still going to be bullies.
That's right.
But if you are bullied because you're gay, and this person is bullied because, I don't know, maybe she's not attractive or whatever to somebody, one is not more important than the other.
Right.
Bullying is wrong,
right.
and having a one-size-fits-all, 0 tolerance for bullying is really all you need, in my opinion. I mean...
Yeah, you just don't accept bullying. And I've often thought this, but I think bullying most clearly, although we of course don't have children in schools anymore, has been on the rise. But I do believe part of it is that they've taken away a child's right to deal with their own bullying. And if you go, I remember once when I was in school and somebody bullied my sister, my little sister, and I was in 5th grade, I believe. And so I heard this, and when I was going home that day, I saw this person. He started picking on my sister again, so I went and I socked him in the nose. And and I was scrawny too, and he was this beefy sort of kid, and he was sort of like in that movie A Christmas Story, when you hit the kid who's the bully, they cry. So he cried and went home, and so his parents went to school, and the next morning I was called into the assistant principal's office in my elementary school, and I was asked, did you hit this child's name was Joe? And I said yes, and they asked me why, and I told them why, and they said, oh, okay, and they sent me back to class. They just said, just don't hit him again. Rather, it would become a major case in schools. Well, now you have to see the therapist, now you have to do this, when maybe someone who's being a bully needs to be dealt with by, I dealt with her and my sister, but by their peers, rather than take away that power that you learn. And I don't mean power over someone, I mean the individual confidence that you build by being able to stand up for yourself. People can't stand up for themselves because they've never been allowed to do it.
Right.
So, the bullying. And I love, one of my favorite bullying stories was when they wouldn't let a member of the public come in who had physical disabilities because she asked for an accommodation and she had difficulty. She needed to sit on the side seat. Who I'm speaking of. And when she was finally told no, that they weren't going to accommodate her, she was standing underneath the no bullying sign that was outside of the school entrance, of the school board administration building entrance. And you just think, what a bunch of hypocrites. And we've seen them bully people in the actual school board chambers when people are. So you see the constant bullying that went on with those people. But anyway, yeah, no bullying.
So it's interesting that you cannot bully someone if you disagree that a girl is not a boy, but it's okay to bully someone who can't stand up for long periods of time. We're very concerned that a parent may not react well when a boy goes home and says, I'm a girl, because we've put that child at risk if we tell them to talk to their parents.
Right.
Yet there are children who've gotten beaten up by parents because they've come home with a bad grade. Where are the people advocating for those children? So is it okay to beat your child for this and not for that? Is this the only issue that's important? Or should we just be against parents beating their children? It should be a one-size-fits-all policy for that,
it shouldn't matter why they're doing it. And that's another thing that I've noticed, that the excuses used to accommodate these socialist policies about what the parents are going to do, with the assumption that most parents are going to beat their children or abuse them or throw them out, when most parents are not going to. And so we go to the lowest common denominator to use that. You play on the heartstrings of people, to use that to take away parental rights.
Exactly.
Their parents are going to be upset with them.
Okay.
So Yeah, well, if you have a situation where the child is actually being abused for whatever reason, that's when you need social services.
Right.
That's when you need those things to be done, no matter what, as you said, the cause. But to take all of those potential might-haves and use them, well, your child's going to be abused, or their parents are not going to accept them. You don't know that.
Right.
You don't know that.
Way to give parents the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
I think we have a question.
Oh, sorry.
No, it was just a reminder of those cold nights in the rain
You remember them, yeah.
that we had to stand outside in a single line.
Mhm.
We're not even allowed in the building,
Yep.
and I know Mrs. Hughes was on the school board at the
She was
time.
comfortable sitting inside.
And I think at the time there were only, out of that whole vast seating area in their chambers, there was only 6 or 7 seats allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to sit outside in the rain because of the rallies.
Yeah.
They were the repression of free speech.
Yep.
And then we haven't touched on, or you all haven't touched on, the issue of the porn in the libraries.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very important thing, of course, is coming out with Governor Youngkin. And also the Black Lives Matter, the transgender issue, which you're touching on right now. But I think there's a lot of pushback against Governor Youngkin's new 2023 school policies, which I think both of you have gone through that. And by and large, I think most everybody supports it. There may be a few nuances that people like to see changed, but it was much better than Northam's old one of 2021.
Yeah, yeah.
So we do need to switch gears to that,
Mhm.
but I do want to point out what he's saying is right about. I think they had 6 or 8 seats open. They were open seats, but one was saved for the VBEA president, and
That's right.
2 or 3 were saved for the press. So really, there were 3 or 4 seats for the public.
Mhm.
Until the night that they had people that wanted to come in and blast a more conservative school board member, and then all the tape came up.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, that night, it was no longer dangerous for people to sit shoulder to shoulder. All the tape was gone.
Mhm.
So it's interesting how a little bit of anger on the side of the left makes diseases go away.
Yeah.
It was impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should make everything go away like that.
Yeah. The hypocrisy, if they think people don't see their hypocrisy, they're wrong.
Oh, I know.
It's almost funny that they actually think people fall for it. And I don't know if it was my husband who said, I don't know if he said it last time, that even the people on your side, they see you're being hypocrites. They might want you to do it.
Right.
But
they
see
know.
You're being everybody sees it. You're not, the total hypocrisy, you're going to talk about hypocrisy, the total hypocrisy of Mrs. Riggs and her decorum, throwing people out of that school board chamber and threatening. I remember, we have it on tape too, we counted the seconds, not even 2 seconds. Someone spoke, I think Amber Thompson spoke, she did a great job. Someone spoke less than 2 seconds of clapping, and she just went on her. You remember it. But someone on the school board uses a foul name against a black conservative military veteran, and for the life of them, they can figure out who in the hallway, who in the auditorium might have said a word that they didn't like. But darn, they can't figure out who the person beside them that said a bad word, and they can't do it. The total hypocrisy.
I have to blame all 11
Exactly.
school board members for not calling that
Mhm.
out. All 11 of them know who it was,
Mhm.
and they need to call it out.
Mhm.
The model policies. Oh. What you were saying, I was thinking, you are never more transparent than when you're trying to hide things.
Exactly.
People ask for
Exactly.
transparency, but when you're being sneaky, it is so
And
transparent.
what's the lesson we learned from Richard Nixon? It's not the crime, but the cover-up that gets you every
That's
time.
it, and that's it.
Uh-huh.
It is the
Uh-huh.
cover-up every single time.
And that could have been so easily handled by just giving a blanket apology from the board to the speaker who was insulted. But no, we got to do a cover-up because we're just hypocrites. So we have to do a cover-up, and it looks like a cover-up. Everybody thinks they know who said it. It's going to be proven, and then let's see where it goes from there.
Well, ladies, if I may,
Always
this
different.
is wide open, as tonight is advertised, that you're not pulling any punches. So I think for the general public, they probably know the gentleman that was referred to was Jerome Bell,
Mhm.
retired Navy chief
Mhm.
of 20-some years. And he delivered his soliloquy on where he felt the transgender system should be, and that's thrown away somewhere. And so when he finished, then I believe, according to public opinion, the school board chair, Mrs. Riggs, is the one that said, and I studied rectal ophthalmology, so I'm not afraid to say it, but she referred to him as an asshole. And so we're a late night viewing here, so I think everybody knows what that is.
We're after prime
So
time.
yeah. So from that point on, you can go ahead and speak freely now.
Well, that's basically, but yet she'll throw people out for clapping. And here's the hilarious part about they're going to throw people out for clapping. It says you can clap in the bylaws. It just says you can't excessively clap. And the last time the bylaws were changed, and I mentioned this, was on that particular issue, was December of 22. So when Trinace Riggs was chair of the bylaw committee, it was left right in there that you can clap. You just can't excessively clap. So she'll throw someone out for not excessively clapping, yet she won't deal with what their own lack of decorum. So.
Well, and after a citizen insulted a woman who spoke, the woman's husband actually used the word ass in chambers and was physically removed. So it's okay for me, but not for thee.
Exactly.
That's a big problem.
Yeah, that's a very big problem. And to go along with that too, the total disdain by the majority of the board for the public, and that was very much evident if you saw Mrs. Riggs speak about, she was just really frustrated and irritated that the public actually decided that they wanted to weigh in on who was on their committees. Did you see her speak about that?
I did. It's almost like the board works for the public.
No, a little. No, they're tolerated. We're allowing you to come in. We're tolerated.
But it's like the public has this misguided belief that elected officials work for them. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah. I mean, I think she. I don't know if she understands what she looks like when she says that stuff. It was absolutely amazing.
It is. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So on to the model policies here. We're getting down to the wire with our time. We want to make sure we don't give that short shrift. So I have, and Robert has gone through the new model policies, Youngkin's model policies. Frankly, I find them all completely unnecessary. The only reason, in my opinion, these would be necessary is to supersede Northam's policies, but I don't think any of them were necessary because all students should be treated respectfully, and they should be treated, equally able to apply to all these programs, safe educational space. I don't think you believing that you are a member of the opposite sex should be an issue.
You shouldn't be treated better or worse for it. You should be treated like every other student.
Right.
Should be. Yeah.
Not less than, but you're not a protected class either. And
that's
that's what the problem is, people wanting to be protected classes.
Right. And then you see all this time and attention that not just that they had the students there speaking all the time, that the board put into this transgender policy. And we like to call it the Owens-Franklin transgender policy, because Mrs. Owens and Mrs. Franklin worked on it together. They worked on that all the time, and it's so much angst and so much effort, and have to have everybody's and how their feelings. Yet, I'm sorry, we at the retreat, and I spoke about this, heard about the discipline issues within the school, heard about how difficult it is for teachers to get their work done when they have to deal with these discipline issues. But I didn't hear this be a major issue for this school board, but their politically motivated transgender issue was, and it also, instead of that, we don't want to bring up the discipline problems within school because it makes the school board and the administration look bad. So what do? You do something else instead. They don't deal with the fentanyl issue, but now finally they're going to have Noxalon in the schools for these. I mean, you would never know. I did not know until I went to a policy review committee how really bad some of the issues are with drugs.
Oh,
I mean, I know they're bad, but as a member of the public, I know they're bad. But so that every school has to have medication to reverse opiates, it's like mind-boggling to me. And then it also boggles my mind. Well, why weren't there already medications in the school system to reverse these opiate overdoses? And so there was a mom who spoke two meetings in a row, and she was very effective about, you're up here, you're talking about all this stuff, but you're not talking about some of the things that really need to be done.
Because the priorities are so misguided.
Mm-hmm.
Children need to be able to read.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be able to do math.
Critically think.
They need to learn those soft skills, how to get them off the phones,
Mm-hmm.
get them off the computers.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be able to interact, which is part of what you touched on with
Yeah.
the bullying. They need
Yeah.
those soft skills to learn how to
How to
navigate.
socialize, yeah.
I mean, I was one of those moms that when my kids came home from school and said, so-and-so doesn't like me, my response was, so? You think everybody's going to like you? Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, you have to
Nice
learn
gentle,
that
nice
you're going to
gentle
deal with.
maternal mom.
Well, yeah. But the truth is, not everybody's going to like
That's
you, and it's
exactly
okay.
right.
Not everybody's going to agree with you, and
you're
that's
not gonna
okay.
like everybody.
We've taught these
Yeah.
children that anybody who disagrees with them is a threat. They are never going to be able to deal with the real world, and they're not accepting diversity when they believe that.
No, they're weakening the children. And I'll get on a couple of those things I would say about this, because when you get to the model policies, you talk about names and nicknames and appropriate gender and stuff like that, and you have so many students that get up and they have this just hyper-inflated idea of what's going to happen, and they're young. I don't blame them. They're young and they're out there. They're fighting a battle, and they'll mature. And God bless them for going out and fighting what they see as the battle front.
True.
Absolutely. But they say things that are factually inaccurate. My friends are going to die. They're all going to commit suicide. This is going to save them. Well, if that's not true, because you would have had this rush of suicides before. You would have had all this within our school system that we haven't had. So they need to deal with facts. That everything that they presented as a fact was from the Trevor Project. And if you go to the Trevor Project's website, there is no fact. It's all opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Very little to no fact on it at all. And I've been to the Trevor Project's website, so I know that. Just like when I did my book review and I put it in, I read my book, but they didn't pull it. So you know how they say they never read your book. The other thing, to get to the point about the nicknames, that people who, and particularly for members of our school board, say a nickname, there's no difference between replacing your dead name with a nickname. And it's the same thing, but it is not the same thing. If you are taking your birth name, which I call it because it is your birth name, calling it your dead name, changing it so that your parents don't know what it is at school and you're hiding it, it is not a nickname, and it is an intellectually weak, actually it's a lie to claim that it is as a reason to okay using these names in schools where your parents don't know.
And that's it.
Yeah.
If you thought it was the same thing, you would have no problem calling that child that other name in front of their parents.
Mm-hmm.
You have acknowledged by the fact that you refuse to do that it's not the same thing.
And to call it a nickname is just flat out lie.
So I understand we have a proposed resolution.
Well, apparently on the upcoming, I haven't seen the agenda yet, but my understanding is on the agenda coming out is a resolution that has been put out. It's going to be on for information to help usher in the new Governor Youngkin's model policies. In that, my understanding is there's not much in our policies we need to change as much as in the regulations of how the policies are enforced. So I won't go through all the whereas, but it should go through, I would think, particularly as Mrs. Riggs said in the June 12th meeting that the school board always follows the model policies of the governor. So I won't go through all the whereas. But they want to go with the code, but they are resolving, I'll just read it because I only just saw this prior to the meeting, that they're resolving that the school board directs the superintendent or designee to replace the entire current regulation 5-7.1 with the 2023 model policies for Virginia Beach City Public Schools, with the document attached to this resolution without modification, and that they do it by no later than August 21st, 2023, the document being, of course, the model policies. Further resolved that the school board directs the superintendent or designee to modify the regulations 5-44.2 to be in compliance with the 2023 model policies, and it resolves that no further changes are to be made to regulation 5-7.1 without school board approval by a majority vote, which I think is very important that they don't change those regulations. And that this resolution will supersede any other past resolution adopted by the board pertaining to this matter, and that a copy of this resolution be spread around across the minutes. And I'm going to bring up one other issue. In fighting this, we're going to hear a lot about lawsuits. We're going to hear, oh, could we be sued if, but I'm going to ask this question that the same people who asked about lawsuits should ask. If you have a child who harms himself or herself because of their parents not being aware of the issues that they are going through in their own life with their sexuality, with anything like that, and you're a lawyer, can the school system be sued for that? If they had knowledge of it, I mean, it's appropriate that a parent could put out a lawsuit, because I did not know my child John was being called Susan at school, that I did not know that they claim that they're transgender, that all of that. I would imagine that that's a bone for a lawsuit as well.
Well, there's a case to be made. But here's what I would say, and actually I've heard Miss Linetti say this multiple times. Mm-hmm. Anyone can bring a lawsuit anytime about anything. Mm-hmm. Will it stand? Maybe, maybe not.
Exactly.
They didn't seem terribly concerned about lawsuits when they weren't letting kids come to school. They didn't seem terribly concerned about school administration making healthcare decisions for children. But they seem incredibly concerned about a lawsuit where you're saying basically all children are going to be treated equally, which is what you should do in schools. So I find it kind of disingenuous.
Yeah. So I guess my point being, the nickname argument doesn't have legs, nor does the lawsuit argument.
No.
They just, I mean, they are, I consider them, I hate to be so crude, but intellectually vacant arguments.
They are.
Yeah.
And these are the arguments that they're fond of calling dog whistles. Like I said, anyone can file a lawsuit anytime, and anytime somebody's telling them to do something they don't want to do, they claim they're worried about being sued, and it's just not true.
Yeah, it's not. They're just saying that, so the other people will start, I hadn't thought about that, let me think about that, and you can distract them from what they otherwise might come to on their own. If I may add one other thing, I think it's important as they go forward and look for a superintendent, that this new superintendent be someone who is not aligned or have been part of the senior administration of Aaron Spence. And because any of those people, I know Dr. Robertson's sitting in there, I personally think he would be, I'm sure he's a perfectly decent person, but I mean, he's well entrenched in that. That is his modus operandi for how he thinks, how he's functioned. I think we need a whole new cleaning out. I think we need all new ideas. We need people to come in who, and the new superintendent, that their background be checked not according to their equity check block, but according to how much, and I don't care what side of the aisle they sit on. If you're there to make sure people learn how to think, and that the children learn how to think, and if you're there instead to have people be indoctrinated rather than taught critical thinking, you do not have confidence in your ideas. Because if you have confidence in your idea is going to rise above when people think and they find it on their own.
That's right.
So, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That's good to know. So I want to announce next week's guest will be Wendy Crutchfield, a realtor from my neck of the woods over there in the Bayville area. And she will be here talking about the project that is proposed in the Whitcliffe area, near Whitcliffe Church. And so make sure you tune in for that. And former Councilman Moss will be back also that week, and he'll be interviewing her. Very well versed in all of these things going on, so that ought to be a great interview. I do want to thank Paula Chang. She has been an amazing motivator in organizing people, and we're very grateful you got involved in all of this. You have been tireless in getting the word out there and helping to organize people. And for those of you who don't know, Paula really was the driving force between Students First, trying to get this school board flipped. And she worked many, many hours to do that. And we appreciate that we got 3 new people on there. It would have been good to get 4, but we got 3, and so those were really good.
May I say really quickly, because one of the things
And you get the last word.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I stole it from you. One of the things I major wanted to do was to just send a big thank you to all the people. Like, we might get credit for certain things. There are so many people that have worked so hard that actually were the people who got the school board members changed, who got them elected, who are out there fighting the battle, and we're fighting it before we ever showed up, and we'll continue fighting it. And I won't name names because there are too many to name, but we are so very grateful for what they've done and what they do every day. They are the reason that the school board flipped, really, or not flipped, but was basically going to flip. So,
Paula, contact information for you.
I'm not going to give my phone number out here, but contact information for me, because I'll help anybody who wants help. is if you go to Facebook and look under my name, Paula O'Donnell Chang, and then just send me a message, then I will friend you. And I know that you can do this because I know that's how the other side stalks me. But my Facebook is kind of boring. So you can find me there.
Could you say it again slowly?
Okay, Paula, and then my middle name is my maiden name, O'Donnell, which is O''DONNELL, and then Chang, CHANG.
Okay.
And it has a lovely picture of Paula in front of the flag at a rally where she spoke so eloquently, as she's done many, many times.
That's it. Good night.
Thank you for joining us.